morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be part of the Asia Diversity Forum. It was a good introduction that Richard had given, but I just go very briefly. So, I've been with JP Morgan as Vice President for 8 years now, and I am currently the Chairperson for Philippine Financial and Inter-Industry Pride. So, this is a 53 member organization that advocates LGBT plus in the workplace. So just to give you a brief introduction of myself, I've been in the BPO industry for 15 years. And it was not just also a professional journey for me. It was a it was also a personal journey in terms of who I am, what is my gender identity, and how I currently express myself from a professional and personal setting. So it wasn't easy for me to understand what being an LGBT is. I grew up in the 80s. I'm from the province. I'm not a native of Manila. So the very limited information you know of in terms of your sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression is very limited. The 80s were like the time in the Philippines where you see that the role models for LGBT during that time is just those you see on television, those who are in the creative business, entertainment industry. Plus, there is no education in terms of what being an LGBT is. So I self-identified as a lesbian when I was growing up. As early as my younger years, I've already felt that I'm kind of different. The way I express myself is different from my sex at birth. So I know that it's gonna be a real journey for me. I'm just very lucky that I have very supportive parents who did not judge me or who did not cast me out as I was growing up, and they see something that was different in me. Hence, they just supported me along the way. So moving on to my professional career, I'm also lucky that my first organization when I worked with is they looked behind what I expressed, right? They didn't see me as, oh, you're not the typical female based on your name, etc. But they looked through what I could deliver in my organization. And I've been there for like 7 years. But still, again, I was in that gender identity journey of who I really am, being limited to the letters of LGBT, which is, as most of you know, is lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. It's difficult to fall on a bucket where you feel that it's not appropriate for me. So with my journey in PFIP and in my current organization, given that there are already a lot of materials of who you are, of SOGI, of how you'll be able to express yourself. I'm currently in the social transition of, because I self-identify now as a transgender man. So I am happily married with my wife. We've been married for 5 years now. And we've been living together for like 7 years. It's very difficult to be in that setting here in the Philippines because same-sex marriage is not yet legalized. We got married in the US, but whenever you step to the soil of Philippines, obviously it's not binding. But even so, we make sure that it's not something that would hamper how we are as a couple. Me personally, it doesn't hamper me in my daily lives. So I'm just lucky that I am in an organization that is very high on advocacy in terms of LGBT in the workplace, and hence we are a part of PFIP and many more organizations. So let me give you a background of what PFIP is. PFIP had been founded in 2013 by 5 financial organizations. So these were the organizations who sat together and said, we should come together to advance the LGBT inclusion in the workplace. So fast forward to 2020, we are now 53 member organizations, and it's more than now the financial industry. We have expanded our reach in different industries as well, surprisingly so that in the Philippines, other industries like energy, IT have their pride organizations. We call it usually their business resource groups or employee resource groups. Um, and before, we used to just call PFIP as Philippine Financial Industry Pride because it was just financial organizations was very active in the LGBT inclusion space. But we wanted to make sure that we're also inclusive of other industries. Hence, we have rebranded it to Philippine Financial and Inter-Industry Pride. So what is our advocacy? What's our mission? Our mission is very simple. It's really to make sure that the organizations advocate for LGBT in the workplace. It's a very plain and simple statement, but it takes a lot of work. That's why we always come together and either share best practice or see what is out there in the Philippine landscape. Given that the Philippines is known to be LGBT friendly and is accepting of how we are as individuals. I mentioned earlier that in the 80s, the stereotypical LGBT in the Philippine setting, especially in the workplace, are those of the creatives, entertainment, etc. I think it has evolved, given that the millennials have touched a different flavor of what it is to be an LGBT in the workplace. So now our statement is we are also professionals in the financial industry, professional in the IT industry, and many others, which we are very glad because we are not boxed just the same way as it was in the 80s, in the 90s, and not just in the Philippines, it's worldwide, right? I think in Netflix right now, it has depicted different stages of LGBT and how it has evolved throughout the years. And it's pretty much the same story in the Philippines. The only thing that we are lucky right now is despite our religious background as a country, we are able to say that we are one of the LGBT friendly countries. So going back to what PFIP does, so we come together to make sure that all these organizations are able to advocate LGBT in the workplace. Next is best practice sharing of how we could be able to execute being LGBT inclusive. Third is provide professional development programs for LGBT professionals. And then fourth is come together in the advocacy, meaning we expand it to our communities. We help out and we do other CSR activities that would obviously be of assistance to some of the minorities or NGOs that are out there that supports LGBT, not necessarily in the workplace, because we also have some LGBT youth, LGBT elderlies that would need their assistance right now. So that is pretty much what we do as a network. What's difficult for the LGBT space in terms of knowing exactly your demographics is people have to be able to self-identify. So it's not as easy as women, men, where the straight women and the straight men are easily just identified by a plain questionnaire of what's your gender, male or female, right? For LGBT, not a lot of our questionnaires, may it be local or international, have that third option saying not really a third sex, but it should be something that outlines how do you self-identify? Because our usual questionnaire would always just put as what's your sex of birth. So our current demographics, we cannot really mention how big we are at this time. We cannot mention how big we are in scale in terms of individual LGBT, because not everyone is confident to be out at work. Some are out at work, but not in their homes, or vice versa. So in PFIP, what we make sure is, apart from us trying to provide professional development to our LGBT professionals, we also try to make sure that they are confident in themselves, right? There are different venues and avenues where PFIP want to put forward what it means to be what it means to really professionalize LGBT in the workplace. We have done numerous Pride summits whereby we talk about a lot of topics that ranges from workplace inclusion for LGBT, what is the current state of the SOGI Equality Bill in the Philippines, and that's very important. Private organizations, what they say is private organizations do have influences uh, on how the government will see something, right? But as SPFIP, we want to make sure that it's rooted in a raw fashion, not just because we come out and rally out there to make sure that SOGI Equality Bill is passed. But I think in this day and age, it's already appropriate that we have to do so, right? We should have a bill that would safely guard everyone in the SOGI spectrum. When I talk about sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, I'd always quote what is always being discussed during the anti-discrimination bill discussions, right? SOGI is for everyone. Everyone has their own SOGI. So it's not like I say SOGI Equality Bill is just for the LGBT. No, it's pretty much for everyone. So I guess PFIP is on that journey and continuously be going to be in that journey to make sure that the Philippine setting is advocating and executing LGBT workplace inclusion.